Kathleen Blanco's single term in office was dominated by the twin crises of Hurricanes Katrina and Rita. But even before the storms, the former governor was trying to address the crisis of education in New Orleans. Stephanie Grace covered Blanco's time in office for The Advocate.
She came in really intending to be an education governor. That was her agenda, that was her passion.
In 2005, 68 of the 170 failing schools in Louisiana were right here in Orleans Parish. Prior to Katrina, Blanco got legislation passed for the Recovery School District, which called on the state to overhaul schools here in New Orleans, a move that caused plenty of controversy.
The pushback was, the idea that there should be local control, that it should be, African-American majority city. The idea of the state taking local schools was controversial.
A study last year found that the post-Katrina reforms in New Orleans moderately improved schools. Gray says that can be debated, but it's clear a change was needed, and Blanco had the political courage to bring that change.
I think she's someone who probably was tougher and had more courage than people gave her credit for at the time, and I think this was the first place you really saw that.
While in office, Blanco also managed to raise teacher salaries to match the Southern average. The next significant raise wouldn't come until the current governor.
Good morning.
Even when she was out of office, she fought for education. In 2009, Blanco and other surviving governors met to lobby then-Governor Bobby Jindal to minimize cuts to higher education.
Today marks the first time.
As a former teacher, Kathleen Blanco's career was rooted in education, and some of her biggest political goals were too. Tan Trung, Eyewitness News.
Again, there are several events scheduled to celebrate the life of Blanco. Thursday morning, an interfaith service will take place at St. Joseph's Cathedral in Baton Rouge. Following that service, she will lie in state in the rotunda of the state capitol. Friday, there will be a public visitation in Lafayette, and Saturday, public visitation will continue, followed by a funeral mass.